Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this webinar. Today I have the honor to welcome Cameron Andrews from beIN Media Group, Chris Tayas from 11 Sport, and Juan Roger from La Liga. Over the next 50 minutes, we will discuss their strategies and the challenges they're facing regarding the fight against piracy. If you have any question for them, you can write them down in the Q&A box, and we will take time to answer them at the end of the webinar. Afterwards, this webinar will be published on our website, and you will be able to download it for free at any time. Before starting the discussion, just a few words about us. Dataxis is a global business intelligence company with offices in Europe, America, and Africa. Regarding our research activity, Dataxis is a leader in market intelligence on TV, media, OTT, and telecom markets. We also organize conferences in different parts of the world, but unfortunately, and as you can imagine, our events for this year have been canceled. But now we're very active online and organize a lot of digital events, such as today's discussion. Furthermore, we recently launched a new data on-demand service with dynamic reports on TV, OTT, and telecom markets by country. And if you subscribe now, you can get 3 free credits to try and download any data you're interested in. Now, a few elements of context and background on the sports media industry. So as you probably all know, over the last decade, sports rights have enjoyed a substantial growth. So on this graph, you can see the evolution over 3 cycles of the domestic rights for the top 5 European leagues in football. You can notice for all countries except for Italy, but which is still quite close, the rights have passed the symbolic milestone of 1 billion euros per season. But, and that's a problem, you can also see that 2 leagues have already experienced a decrease in the rights value in the last tender. So Premier League 2 years ago and the Bundesliga just a few days ago. So it still remains early to tell if the decrease reflects the long expected drop in sports media rights value because of piracy, between other factors, or might be just a potential short-term impact of the COVID-19 situation. But, and I'm sure my panelists won't, especially Cameron, won't disagree with me, but piracy definitely constitutes an issue that will have an impact on the next tenders. Indeed, rights are usually sold on an exclusive basis, but, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that during our discussion, but can we really call it exclusive when all the content is easily available everywhere on the internet? And if we've seen that media rights have significantly increased over the last 10 to 15 years, the figures become even more gigantic when we put them into perspective. So if we take the example of Spain, here on the left, you can see the value of media rights to La Liga and to Champions League. And on the right, you have the total pay TV revenues per year. So you can easily realize that the investment needed to secure the rights to La Liga represents around half of the total value of pay TV revenues. And now if you add the Champions League, it accounts for around 2/3. So when we see how significant and gigantic this investment in sports are, we can understand how damaging pirate alternatives can be for our broadcasters, because it decreases the value of the rights they own. And that could lead to a potential rights bubble burst that will also affect the rights holders and every member of the value chain, basically, even clubs or players. So what looks like a concern for broadcasters only is actually a threat to the whole industry. And I think it's always good to keep that in mind. And finally, today we're also going to talk about the booming penetration of OTT and the consequences it might have in terms of piracy. So as you probably all know, nowadays, one of the most discussed topics is the alleged competition between pay TV and SVOD. If we take the example of Western Europe, where all of our panelists have operations in, you see that this opposition between SVOD and pay TV has not really translated into facts as much as it did in the US. Indeed, the SVOD growth hasn't come at the expense of pay TV yet, and we can even notice a very slight growth both in terms of revenues and subscribers, but still far away from the increase in SVOD. The growth potential of pay TV is just becoming more and more limited, essentially because the most advanced markets have almost reached saturation. And another element to take into account is the fact that the COVID-19 situation has hit almost all sports broadcasters, with all events being canceled, or almost all of them. And if on the long term, it's hard to know to which extent this crisis will change sports fan behavior. Will they subscribe again next season? Maybe they realize that at the end of the day, they didn't miss sports that much during the lockdown. Well, the audience ratings of the Bundesliga, La Liga, Premier League have been quite high in recent weeks and beat some records, but it's still too early to draw any conclusion. And furthermore, SVOD platforms have been the big winners of the crisis. And if we saw that until now, SVOD growing penetration hasn't come at the expense of pay TV, well, it might be the case now, since customer might have to arbitrate between many different services. And that's why sports broadcasters will have to enhance the value proposition to customers. And that's also something that broadcasters can do and apply into the fight against piracy, offering more value to the customers so they come back to legal subscriptions. But I'm sure we're going to address this topic during our webinar. So now I think it's time for me to welcome our panelists. So gentlemen, hi, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, your companies, and your responsibilities inside the company. So maybe Juan to start, since you're the only rights holder today.
Okay, thank you very much, Dataxis, for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm Juan Rocher from La Liga. I am in charge of the global content protection area from a legal perspective.
Okay, Cameron.
Sure, thank you too for the opportunity. So I'm Cameron Andrews, I'm Legal Director for Anti-Piracy at beIN. beIN is a broadcaster headquartered in Qatar and broadcasting on satellite across Middle East and North Africa. We also have channels in France, North America, Southeast Asia and Australasia. beIN also owns Digiturk, a pay TV company in Turkey, and is the owner of Miramax Films. So in my job, I have been leading on anti-piracy strategy and operations across our group.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Chris.
Hello, everyone. Chris Tice, Head of Digital Projects for 11 Sports. For anyone that doesn't know, 11 Sports is a global sports provider. We have platforms across Asia and Europe. My responsibilities are to manage the program of digital projects across the group, all of our product roadmaps, including our OTT product roadmap, and basically just ensuring that all of our digital offerings are as good as they can be. And part of that is ensuring that our content is protected and safe from pirates.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So to start, and we won't dig into too many technical details today for this webinar, but could every one of you give us a brief description of the tools, the pillars of your strategy against piracy in your day-to-day operation? So maybe to start, Cameron, I believe beIN has 4 main pillars.
Yeah, sure. So I describe it as really breaking down into 4 pillars. There are 4 things that can be done which have an impact on piracy. We know they have an impact on piracy. So it really breaks down into, the first one is watermarking. So it's technology that allows you to identify the subscriptions which are being used as a source for restreaming on the internet. So you can, if you can identify those and switch them off in good time, then you can disrupt the streams. BN has put a lot of investment into this technology, and we've seen good results from it, but it isn't a silver bullet, and it's not available to everyone's business model. You know, you have to really be in control of your platform in order to use that sort of technology. And I think you can do what we call disruption or notice and takedown. So that means you identify the internet service providers and different internet companies that are providing services to enable the pirates to operate, and you send them takedown notices. And during games, that happens in real time. We identify the ISPs and the CDNs, and we send them takedown notices. Unfortunately, the compliance rates for that are very poor. We don't have great laws anywhere really to support the type of fast takedown that's required to protect live sports content. But outside the live games, we also look for the other platforms and means that pirates are promoting themselves, like social media profiles and e-commerce sites, app stores, and we do takedown notices to those as well. The third one is blocking. So this is where we get orders requiring ISPs to either block access to pirate streaming websites or in a more sophisticated form where they really do in the UK is probably leading, but it's happening in some other countries too. You get ISPs to block customers from being able to access the servers that are delivering the pirate streams during the live game. So that is also quite effective. And the fourth thing is old-fashioned boots on the ground investigation and enforcement. Working out where the pirates are, who they are, and bringing actions against them. We've done some of that, and the industry has been doing some of that. And of course, it's effective against those pirates, but there are a lot of pirates out there, and the process is very slow and it's very resource intensive. But really, the strategy, I think, for everybody kind of really needs to fit around those four pillars. And there's other things that have to be done as well. You have to maintain good platform and content security, technical measures. They on their own won't stop streaming piracy. But if you don't have it, then you make your platform much more vulnerable. And of course, there's things like lobbying as well to get better laws. And there's a role there probably for some education as well.
Yeah, and we're going to touch this point later. Juan, La Liga has developed four many tools in the fight against piracy. So maybe can you touch on that?
Yeah. I share, of course, the opinion of Cameron regarding the importance of having those pillars, you know, and that's why La Liga share the same pillars in terms of technology. We have here in Madrid our own laboratory with more than 20 people working there with different backgrounds. And there we develop powerful tools and software that are very useful then to find evidence or detect the pirate content on the internet or the source of that content. So we are doing a lot of efforts in order to continue developing tools and you know, improving those that we already have, and then of course sharing this information and this important evidence with our broadcasters, but also with other stakeholders of the industry. We also, of course, do some enforcement actions around the world. We are not only focused in Spain, we are focused worldwide in order to support all of our broadcasters around the world. So we do legal actions, let's say criminal actions, or try to obtain blocking orders in different countries. We recently achieved a blocking order in Russia. And also a thing that we do is some lobbying in order to obtain better regulations or better law that can support our efforts against piracy. We do, as I said before, collaboration mainly with other stakeholders in order to support the industry, because our philosophy is that we have to be together, all the stakeholders at the moment of fighting piracy. That's why we are collaborating with others. And finally, we do some communication campaigns. In the past, we used to promote a campaign before the matches regarding the importance of protecting the content or the damages about the piracy in connection to the competition. So that's our pillars, and we are working in all of them every day.
Okay, thank. Yeah, we're gonna come back to many of things you said. And Chris, finally, could you give us some details about your strategy, and does it vary from market to market where Eleven operates?
I think, well, firstly, look, I mean, like Cameron and Guan, the first thing is that to tackling piracy is to heavily invest in anti-piracy technology. We do that across all of our OTT services. That's something we really believe in, and we take our responsibilities in that regard very seriously. Another thing we're doing is, wherever possible, we're working with partners to lobby governments and try and bring forward stricter laws. But I mean, the reality is, in the current market, that pirate streams are still widely available, despite doing all that. So for every legal stream, there's 4 illegal ones. So those measures don't work by themselves currently. So that means we need to focus on making it easier and cheaper for fans to watch our content. So, because our research shows that fans are willing to pay for it if it's at the right price and available where they want to watch it. So we really focus on very competitive pricing and flexible subscription offerings. For instance, in Belgium, we offer sport-specific passes. We do that for US sports and fight sports, and that's something we've seen being really popular. And thirdly, our focus, and in particular my main focus in my role, is on providing a really superior product that fans are happy to pay for over pirate ones. That starts with basic things like high quality, reliable streams, personalized UI, and innovative features like our Watch Together tool, which is something we introduced last year. Because all of those things help to give fans a reason to subscribe to a premium option over essentially a free one or a very low cost one.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, we're gonna also address that. If so, the priority to fight piracy is to tackle the piracy first, or to enhance the value proposition to customers. But first, maybe Cameron, there are different kinds of piracy. So you have streaming websites, you have on social networks, you have IPTV services and set-top boxes. So do you estimate that one of them is most damaging and more dangerous for broadcasters and rights holders? And if so, which one?
Well, I think they're all damaging. I mean, when it comes to social media, it's very damaging because of the enormous reach that those platforms get. But the promising thing there is at least the big platforms are providing some tools to control the problem to some extent. I think we have a long way to go there, but reasonably progress can be made. The streaming websites, you know, they're a big issue too. They've been around for a while. You know, there's thousands of websites out there where people can easily go and find streams of the games. So I think they're a big issue. But the really big one, I think, is the pirate IPTV apps. So these are services that anyone can really get an app now. It's not hard to find one and download it and use it on your device. And for a very, very low cost, you can watch thousands of channels. You know, it's not uncommon for services to have 10,000 channels on there. And for, you know, maybe $50 a year. It is very hard to compete against that sort of service where a pirate is making the world's content available for pretty much nothing. There is no licensed way that anyone else could try to compete with that sort of service. So I think the ubiquity of those sorts of services is a real, you know, it's a game changer for the industry. It is something that could really kill it.
Okay, thank you. Juan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. As Cameron was saying before, the truth is that all kind of piracy produce damages, right? So, but however, we know that not all of them are equally harmful or they commit the damage in the same manner. So our biggest concern nowadays are, of course, the IPTVs and the streaming sites, and because basically these services illegally transmit TV channels to dedicated sites and third-party applications that can be run on different ISDs or also in legitimate devices. And you know, today are many illegal IPTV services worldwide, many of which are subscription-based, as Cameron said, just 15 euros per year, and they have an important and complex technical infrastructure. And we are working also very hard to remove these IPTVs. And also we can mention here the applications of the mobile devices. We are working hard with that. We have some collaboration agreement with most of the most important markets for apps. And then, of course, social media is very important because of the same reason that Cameron said. Everyone nowadays have social media. Social media is very important for the people. And in that sense, we need some collaboration, or let's say an important help from the platforms in order to remove that content. Or sometimes we need their help because we need to know which is the person that is behind a profile, a social media profile, which is offering subscriptions. So as I said before, all kind of piracy are damaging our rights.
And Facebook and YouTube already developed some tools to help rights holder, right?
Yeah. They developed one tool each other, and we are using them. Of course, that are very helpful for that, but we need more efficiency in order to remove in a faster manner the content that we detect, because for us the live content is the most important thing, and we need the most fast solution possible in order to remove all the content from the platforms.
Chris, when we talk about piracy, we often hear that the sports industry needs to do what the music industry has done with piracy and illegal downloads. So do you think it's a relevant comparison?
I think they're very good examples from the wider entertainment industry of, all of their content is available online, but it's still enough for people to pay. Their product is still enough for people to part with money for it. I think because they focus on personalization, competitive pricing, and great content, people are happy to pay. I think when you compare Spotify, I think it's difficult in a way because you can't really the consumption of music and sport is very different behavior. Sport, as Juan just mentioned, is primarily around the live. That's where the value is. But what Spotify have done so well is create a personalized product that greatly enhances the user's experience compared to the pirate one of streaming it illegally. You find content on Spotify that you wouldn't have found otherwise if you were going with the old traditional pirate experience. So I think it's a good example, but I think that sport needs to take its own approach in how we do that.
Okay. And as I said during this presentation, broadcasters are more known for being directly affected by piracy, but at the end of the day, every stakeholders feels the damage. So Chris, do you think the fight against piracy should be led by rights holders first or by broadcasters first?
Look, I think it's a really complicated situation, obviously, but also at the same time, it's a really simple one as well. And the only way for the industry to move forward and solve the problem is everyone recognises the importance and the impact that piracy is having and works together. I think a big issue for us as a broadcaster is that we can spend fortunes evaluating and implementing anti-piracy tech, but it's not going to solve the problem in our markets because the internet is global and pirates, if they can't get 11 sports feeds, they'll just get them from another source, and people in our markets can consume them. But then we also understand that a broadcaster who's acquiring rights in another market where those rights aren't as critical to their business, they can't afford to spend huge amounts on anti-piracy tech. Simple economics will tell you that that's not feasible. So, but the issue is that creates vulnerable links in the chain. I think with the scale and the complexity of the problem now, we'd really like to see others follow La Liga's lead by taking a centralised approach, offering support and guidance to broadcasters on anti-piracy tech to every broadcaster, and that includes betting broadcasters as well. I think La Liga have done a great job with the introduction of their anti-piracy department, and particularly in offering that support to other rights owners as well with their findings and technology. That the Pro League in Belgium, for example, being one of those, which we're very happy about, as we're the rights owner of that content in Belgium for the next 5 years. I'm sure they can speak about that work in more detail. But I think as a broadcaster, we'd really like to see those firm commitments, particularly when it comes to an allocation of revenues being allocated to anti-piracy activities.
Okay. Cameron, beIN is known as one of the most involved stakeholders in the sports industry in the fight against piracy. So do you expect more from rights holders? Do you think it's their role to lead the fight?
Yeah, look, I think rights owners are absolutely key here, and there needs to be a shift in the way many rights owners think about piracy. You know, traditionally, it was seen as a broadcaster's problem, something that was coming off the broadcaster's network. They had to fix it. Rights owner's job was just to sort of, put the rights up every few years and collect the money, and then worry about it the next time the cycle came around. I mean, for starters, from a commercial perspective, the rights owner is selling exclusivity. You know, the value is in the exclusivity. And if it's all over the internet, there's no exclusivity. These are non-exclusive rights, and so the value is not there. So just from a commercial perspective, of course, the rights owner sits at the top of the tree here and needs to take responsibility for that. But even on a more practical level, there's very good reasons why the rights owner really needs to lead. And if you look at those 4 pillars I said, pretty much all of those, there's a big role for the rights owner, and actually more a role for the rights owner really than the broadcaster, than the licensee. You know, the watermarking, yeah, the licensee can implement watermarking, but to Chris's point, it's not much point in us protecting our platform if the content just comes in from everybody else's platform, which is not protected in the same way. So the rights owner really has to mandate technologies and make sure it's even across the whole market that they're licensing into. Notice and takedown is happening at the licensee level. You just get all this double up. Everyone's there during a game sending takedown notices to the same people. You know, that's ridiculous. It needs to be centralized, and the rights owner is the person, the entity that's best placed to do it. The blocking, rights owners have a big role in blocking. And in fact, they're the owners of the content, and they're the ones who often have the legal standing to bring these sorts of cases, to get blocking orders. As the exclusive licensee in the legal system, we're kind of next step down. So we can't do it without their support, and they really need to lead. And even on the investigation and enforcement, often what happens here with investigation is an enforcement is it takes a very long time, and the rights change hands. The licensees change every couple of years in markets. And I know of cases that have been grinding on for like 10 years, and people have forgotten who filed them by the time they finally get to court, because there's been so many different licensees change hands over the years. And so, you know, really needs to be the rights owner that's driving that process.
Juan, as a rights owner, do you agree?
Completely agree. As owners of the content, I have to say with absolute confidence that we, the right holders, must take care of this fight first, right? And there is, well, 2 reasons, basically. On the one hand, as Cameron said before, our broadcaster pay for the exclusivity of our content in many countries, and therefore we have to work to ensure that exclusivity, right? And on the other hand, we as organizers of sports competitions, if we do not protect our content and piracy grows, this directly affects the economy of our clubs and our competitions. So that's mainly the reasons. And that's why from La Liga, we are fighting piracy in our own, from our organization, with our own tools, with our own people in-house, everything, because we know that we have this responsibility before, but that said, fortunately, today our broadcasters, they have experts in piracy. A clear example of that is beIN Sports and 11 Sports. And this help us a lot to work in a most effective manner, and we are very grateful because of that, because this support is very useful then to tackle the piracy in particular countries.
Yeah, so talking about cooperation between rights holders and broadcasters, Cameron, could you give us more details about how La Liga and beIN are working together?
Yeah, sure. Look, and in my sort of, my campaign to get rights owners to take this more seriously, I'm not saying there isn't a role for broadcasters, because as Juan says, you know, we're the ones operating in the territories and we're the ones operating our channels. So we often know what's happening in our backyard better than a rights owner sitting in a European capital necessarily can. So there is a role there for us definitely to also be skilled up and staffed up and to be working with the rights owner. You know, I think we've started a good cooperation with La Liga on that. You know, we have monthly meetings, we share intel, we're building cases together. They know what we're doing around our watermarking strategy. We share information about that. You know, and we're really looking to deepen that cooperation more and more as time goes on. And I think it will show good results.
Okay. Chris, on the cooperation between rights holder, broadcaster, or broadcasters together, how is 11 Sports doing?
We're in discussions with all of our rights holders about, and platforms and cable operators and telcos to jointly work on solutions, because that really is the only way that we can solve the problem. If we all try to do our own thing, broadcasters, platforms, it doesn't work. As Cameron mentioned earlier, multiple people sending takedown notices is just isn't practical and isn't the way to move forward. I think, unfortunately, you know, COVID, in my view, is really only going to make the problem of piracy worse, and will have a big negative impact as people have, generally in the economy, less money to spend and spent more time on their computers. So I think, look, moving forward, it's more important now than ever that broadcasters and rights owners need each other's support to bring about this change.
Okay. And Juan, you've already mentioned cooperation with other rights holders, and Chris has talked about it in Belgium. So could you give more details about your cooperation with the Belgian Jupiler Pro League, for example, or the MotoGP?
Yeah, despite the collaboration that I explained before with our broadcaster, that we support them from a technological and a legal perspective, we also collaborate with other stakeholders of the industry, not necessarily broadcasters. We collaborate with other leagues, for example, or other sports organizations, in order to support them in this fight against piracy, sharing our knowledge and sharing our tools or evidence then to file a legal action, whatever. And in such regard, we are collaborating now with Jupiler Pro League, which is the Belgium league, and Dorna Sports, which is the company in charge of organizing the MotoGP competition. But we also collaborate with other kind of entities, like the Ministry of Culture here in Spain. And also we are collaborating with Indecopy, which is the authority on intellectual property matters in Peru.
Oh, okay. And talking about this work with the Ministry of Culture, and we've already briefly mentioned lobbying. So do you feel like you have enough support from public stakeholders? Because public stakeholders also have to get on board in the fight together against piracy.
Well, when we talk about European authorities, it should be recognized that important enforcement actions were taken against illegal IPTV providers. Last year, Eurojust, which is a European Union Agency for Criminal Justice Cooperations, coordinate an international team police in Europe in order to shut down an important platform. This year, we have another similar case here in Spain. Spain coordinated by an international coalition, but also with Eurojust and Europol. And in that case, we support that action. But it's true that we need more efforts from European authorities in terms, for example, of obtaining administrative site blockings in most of European countries, or better regulation in favor of our IP rights. So it's true that some of them are collaborating, but we need more help. That's the truth. And finally, our problem with piracy is not just focused in Europe, as I explained before. We are working in every country of the world. So this means that we need the support of the authorities in every country of the world where our content is infringed, right? So that's why we are doing some lobbying, not only in Europe. So we have meetings with many authorities in other countries in order to obtain protection for our product.
Cameron, do you feel the same need and of support from public stakeholders and regulatory authorities?
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be a big change there. You know, for the last 25 years, the internet has been regulated in a way where it's been assumed that internet companies need a leg up. You know, they need their investments protected from the threat of copyright actions. So we've had safe harbors like the DMCA and the European e-commerce directive, which have become the models followed everywhere. And it basically removes liability for any sort of internet companies for having to take any proactive measures to prevent copyright infringement. Those companies have had their leg up. They are doing very well, and we need to restore the balance here. In fact, internet companies really, they hold the key here. They are the gatekeepers to the internet, and we really need to have a better regulatory system, particularly when it comes to live sports. You know, these games only last for 90 minutes. They are these are very fragile rights, and we need far better both laws and cooperation from internet providers to be able to stop those streams. You know, whether it be through blocking or be through notice and takedown, you know, the big changes need to happen there.
Okay. And Juan talked about La Liga working in different parts of the world. So Chris, we often say that piracy is a global ecosystem, but there is also more piracy in MENA, for example, with BOutQ that everybody has heard of. So how do you see the regional disparities or from country to country for the markets you operate in?
Well, I mean, in one sense, you know, piracy is a global problem because you can access pirate links from wherever you are in the world and they can be distributed from anywhere in the world. But we definitely see a huge difference in terms of consumption from market to market. We found in certain markets to Singapore that the behaviour is incredibly normalised. You can walk down the high street there and acquire devices in stores, in actual bricks and mortar stores, and it's very difficult for a consumer to discern a legitimate service from an illegal one. What we also see in markets where broadcasters have had a monopoly on the market for a long time, you also see an issue because when there is only one operator, what often happens is there's a limited and premium subscription offering, which is something that in itself fuels piracy as prices tend to be high and consumers look for other options. And they feel justified in doing so because they don't feel as though they're being presented with a legal alternative to watch the content that they love. And that's part of 11's approach overall, really, is to disrupt that old system, that monopoly through our platform agnostic strategy and the way we bundle content and price it in a really competitive way with flexibility in terms of what you pay for versus traditional sort of all-in subscription approaches.
Okay. Juan, about the regional disparities?
Yeah, I share that view. Regarding the way of consuming piracy, of course, that there are differences, since this is something related to other factors, And for example, the speed of internet that can exist in a particular country. In that sense, you can find countries where people consume pirate content mostly through IPTV platforms or streaming sites, and in other countries, you will find more consumption through illegal cable operators. And then concerning the possibility of solving or tackling the piracy in different countries, we know that online and broadcast piracy remains a challenging copyright enforcement issue in many countries of the world. And in such regard, despite the efforts of the industry, we still have no positive results in those kind of countries. And regarding this topic, it's important to highlight the necessity of regional coordination and cooperation between the countries, since this will increase the effectiveness of engagement on IP protection and enforcement challenges that extend beyond, individual countries. So that's my opinion regarding this.
Okay, Cameron, you want to comment on that?
So, yeah, sure. So Clearly, there are regional differences, and in many ways, MENA leads the way on pirate consumption, but it's not just MENA. I spent a bit of time looking at Thailand for a while there, and Thailand, I think for cultural reasons, also has very high piracy rates. But other places are falling behind, but what you see is it's growing everywhere. So even though the numbers may be smaller in some markets, it's on the upward trend everywhere. I just want to respond to the point about pricing and the commercial side of it. I mean, for sure, there is always a commercial piracy, but I think we have to be careful in drawing the wrong lessons from the music industry. And I actually was in the music industry doing anti-piracy for quite a few years. And I think what actually happened in music was we moved from downloads to streaming, and pirates didn't make the shift. Pirates, actually, their model is still based around downloads. And for various reasons, they weren't really able to build a model like a Spotify or even a YouTube. And some could actually say YouTube really started out as a service. It was basically about piracy, but resulted in a massive library of content that could be streamed. And the pirates simply weren't able to make that shift. And that's what's really killed, well, hasn't killed piracy, but I think that's what's really changed the dynamic for music industry piracy. I can't see that happening with live sports in quite the same way, because the dynamics of live sport is very different to streaming a music file. The risk with trying to get in, for want of a better description, say a race to the bottom with the pirates with pricing, is that actually a low cost service is a gift to the pirates. I mean, pirates will love to have a subscription which is very low cost and essentially kind of disposable, because when it comes to things like watermarking and where they're trying to detect and kill subscriptions, the flip side to the watermarking is when we kill a subscription, it's actually quite high cost to the pirates and quite a lot of trouble for that pirate to then go and replace it. And actually, partly what we're doing is just is hitting their business model, because there's a massive cost to them than just maintaining the subscriptions. But if we're providing subscriptions to people for single events at very low cost, $5 or whatever, that's a field day for pirates, because they only need a bank of subscriptions that they're bought for very low cost. They probably only need 10 sitting there on the shelf, and there they are. They're all set for the game, and there's nothing that watermarking is going to do about it. So I think we should be very careful about seeing how, thinking that there is a commercial solution here. I think, there's always a business element to piracy, but it certainly won't be a kind of race to the bottom on cost will not be the answer to stopping it.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to ask you to react to that, because 11 Sports, and we're going to talk about OTT now, because 11 Sports has kind of disrupted the sports broadcasting landscape with OTT products, with new features, with a lower price than the traditional sports package on pay TV. And also with the flexibility, so you can cancel it every month. So for you, does OTT represent more risk or an opportunity when it comes to fighting piracy?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on what Cameron said. I agree to some extent, and you're right, low cost isn't the answer, but I think flexibility and affordability is, to an extent. I think it's very important that fans feel as though they're getting value for money, and I think when in fact people feel as though they're getting value for money, they're more happy to pay for it in a general way. I think when it comes to OTT in general, I think it's obviously opened up a lot more opportunities for pirates to steal content than there was previously. I think it also presents some opportunities as well. In Italy, we show all of Series C, which is the third division there. It's something like there's 60 teams in that, so a lot of matches every weekend. We also do all of the production, so we control the complete delivery flow to the end user, and that content is priced affordably. There's very flexible subscription offerings where you can buy a game through various of our partner channels, and you can also buy subscriptions. And that's something, as a result, we see very relatively low levels of piracy in comparison to our premium content.
Okay. Juan, many rights holders have or are considering launching their own OTT D2C products. La Liga has, but even it's free, subscription free, and more dedicated to tier 2 and tier 3 sports. But what's your view on OTT and its booming penetration in terms of piracy? Is it a risk? Is it more opportunity?
Well, I personally prefer to be optimistic and believe that the OTTs will bring good opportunities to reduce piracy. I think that the appearance of OTT means that there is a new type of legal offer that allows you to enjoy the content through a tablet, smart TV, or mobile phone. And in that sense, we hope that this will help to increase the use of OTTs by those users who prefer to consume, the content through those devices. So instead of choosing the illegal offer in your device, you will have the legal offer, and very easily to download the app and register, and the good things about OTT. And also from a consumer perspective, purchasing legitimate content reduce the exposure to malware. In other words, this means that the users who access pirate content have more malware infections. And I think that this is a message that we should not stop sending to people who prefer to consume content via internet, so that they stop accessing to illegal streaming sites or illegal source and switch to a legal OTT, for example, in order to protect their devices and personal information. This is something very useful then to convince the people about consuming legal offers.
Cameron, Bean has also its own OTT D2C product with Bean Connect. So how do you want to elaborate on that, on the explosion of OTT related to piracy?
Look, I think pirates will take the content, if it's valuable content, they don't kind of care where they take it from. If it's being distributed on OTT, then they'll take it from OTT. If it's being distributed on DTH, then they'll take it on DTH. At the moment, what we actually see is if you've got strong DRM on your OTT platform, actually the pirates are far more likely to go for DTH as a source, because the big weakness there is actually the HDMI output of a set-top box. It's very easy for a pirate simply to restream from that. It's very easy to strip out HDCP, and it's very easy. It's a bit harder probably to take from OTT. And so OTT is less favored as a piracy source than DTH. But that said, I don't think it means that OTT is not a target for piracy. If the pirate will always go for whatever the weakest link is, and if you're only distributing on OTT, it isn't tricky for a pirate to use that as a source either.
Okay, Chris, still on OTT. So from what I've understood, for you, the first priority solution is to enhance the value proposition to customers. So they feel like they have the price they pay is worth the money, the product. So can you explain us how do you try to improve the user experience from sports broadcasters with it?
Sure. I mean, look, I think firstly, the most important thing, and it's proved to be the most effective, is to work with everyone to impose stricter laws. I'm not disputing that at all. Reducing pirate options for consumers will direct more people to legitimate services than anything else. But I think in the current climate, we have to accept that that's not, it's been that way for a while, that pirate content is everywhere. So we have to look at other ways to try and solve the problem. And I think one of those is offering a really innovative and engaging product. Something we've seen great results from is the Watch Together tool I mentioned earlier. That's something we introduced last year. For anyone that doesn't know, it allows for fans to watch in a room together with your friends. It syncs the video stream so you're watching at the same point in time. We've added things like text chat to that, so group and public chat. You can start little groups within that. We've enabled a public rooms feature as well, which means that you can connect with other fans online. And it's currently web only, but we're looking at rolling that out across all of our devices, hopefully. along with loads of other gamification and interactive elements that we hope, again, give fans a real reason to subscribe to our product.
So what's the most important, the commercial offer, so price and flexibility, or the user experience, or both?
I think it's a real combination of both. I think that the first thing people look at is typically the price and the content that they're paying for, but then I think beyond that, it's the user experience. But really, it's a combination of all three. You have to provide a product that people want, and people get value from.
Juan, about the commercial aspect, what OTT can bring to the customers, how do you see that? You want to elaborate on what would be the priority solution right now?
You mean in terms of piracy, or?
Yeah.
Well, I think that our job, in order to disrupt the piracy in some point, or the main goal, is to move the people from the illegal services to the legal offer. So, as Chris said before, I think we are talking about complementary solutions. But first, we are trying every day, through our actions, through our lobby, with our technology, to disrupt those who are consuming piracy, in order to then they move to the legal subscription. And then, of course, start the commercial part of this story, and where you need, well, the good offers, or the user experience, or whatever. But we are working on that. We are working in that step previous to the commercial side, in order to, but also then, of course, because then when if we, for example, we have our broadcaster, they pay for our content there, then we start collaborating with them. So we are working in both sides, right?
Cameron, do you want to comment on that?
No,
and if the priority would be more to tackle the rampant availability of pirate alternatives first?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think the problem is, so long as the piracy is so accessible, it isn't really a matter of just making it more accessible than the pirates can. If you go back to the apps, it's not possible to compete on price against a service that can make 10,000 channels available to you for $50.
That's true.
On a service, you don't need to buy anything else. So I think that really is the starting point.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's going to be my last questions. It's been almost about an hour. So Chris, so you've talked about the challenges to invest in an anti-piracy program, but towards the future, and I think you'll agree, there's still a long way to come for the fight against piracy to becoming successful. So what's going to be the biggest challenge in the next years to fight piracy?
Well, I think that the scale of the problem, and also the number of stakeholders involved to coordinate responses, I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think also, as Cameron just touched on, the growing sophistication of pirates, it's very hard to compete with a service that offers that many channels for very little money. So, that's scary, and I think those two things really are the biggest challenges.
Okay, Juan, for you, so biggest challenge.
Well, from a purely legal and enforcement perspective, I think one of our biggest challenge nowadays is to obtain administrative site blockings in most of the countries. And I say administrative because we don't want court actions. We don't want long court actions where you have to submit evidence, long proceedings. We need something very fast in order to stop the illegal streaming transmissions quickly. So I think that the best solution for that is some administrative measures, let's say blocking orders. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we have, as I said before, from a legal or enforcement perspective. Then, of course, there are many other challenges in terms of technology, or or in law, or in better regulations. But this is from my point of view, one of the biggest ones.
Okay, thank you. And just before asking Cameron and letting him conclude, so just right after we would take questions. So if you have any now, it's probably the right time to ask them in the Q&A box. Cameron, for the final words of this webinar. So for you towards the future, and I know you're still not really satisfied.
It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, but I'm sure you're gonna be worth it. And
so I would say I am optimistic that the tools are there to tackle piracy and make the pirate product less competitive than the legitimate product, which is ultimately what the goal of piracy is to make the legitimate product more attractive to consumers than the pirate product. And I think the tools are there to do it. You know, those 4 pillars that I talked about, each of those do have an impact on piracy, between watermarking, blocking, takedown notices and disruption, and investigation and enforcement. Those 4 things in combination can work. The big challenge is coordinating ourselves, getting rights owners to coordinate and take responsibility in particular, and investing the resources that are going to be required and doing it quickly to pull this off. And I think that's absolutely the key challenge. And it's very difficult for people to work out, you know, for businesses to work out, well, how much resource do I invest in this? How do I get the staff to do it? What's going to be my payback? Why am I doing it? Why isn't somebody else doing it? And I fully understand it because piracy requires us to think about issues in a way that no other business issue really does. And I think that is the biggest challenge. But if that can be done, then I think it is possible to tackle piracy. But it's just time will tell whether the industry is able to pull that off or not.
Yeah, so let's be optimistic and hope that everyone will come on board, every stakeholder in the industry. And I mean, in the news recently, we have had some good news and that set an example to fight piracy. So let's hope it keeps like that. So let's take some questions. I have one question for you, Cameron, from Piotr Vosto. So how much time do you need to identify subscriber when you detect watermark on piracy source? And what is your policy in such cases? Do you terminate such subscriber account or make legal action?
So watermarking can work pretty quickly. I don't want to go into too much details about that because I feel like I'm giving away too much, which might ultimately find its way into pirates. But I mean, watermarking, the theory of watermarking is it's kind of shoot to kill. You do a detection during a live game and you kill the subscription in real time. When it works, it's very effective.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Rajay Bell. Would sanctioning the end user be a more effective way to tackle piracy? So I don't know who wants to take this one.
Well, from in our case, we don't look for the consumers. We are looking every time for the pirates that are sharing our content because finally they are the infringers of our rights. And one thing important related to this is that there are many users around the world that they think that the IPTV subscription that they are paying is legal. So that's a problem because that people don't know that the product that they are paying is illegal. But the thing is that these IPTVs that now they have very good look and feel, you know, with very attractive for the consumers, with nice websites and all the channels that they offer. The people think that they are, in some cases, that they are, you know, legal subscriptions. So that's something important related to this question that we have to keep in mind. So from La Liga, we are always and only tackling the piracy against the pirates.
Okay. Another question from William Martucci. What about the impact of fragmentation of content? For a lot of fans, having to subscribe to different channels is perceived as the main problem and motivation to use pirate alternatives. Even well-priced bundles exist. So could broadcasters improve this in any way? So the question is obviously more for Chris or Cameron?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. I mean, at 11, that is what we're trying to do. We're again, I go back to our platform agnostic strategy. We want fans to be able to watch our content wherever they want to watch it. That's why we do deals with operators in all of our markets. We operate our own OTT services. We offer plenty of content through social. I think the dream of having all of the content you want, everything available on one service is unrealistic. Unfortunately, it's just the way content ownership is. But I think when it comes to sport, we will continue to make sure that we make our content available to fans wherever they want to watch it.
Okay, Cameron, you wanna also take that one? Or?
I'll leave that to Chris.
Okay, well, thank you. So if we don't have any more questions, we have a question for Juan from Piotr Oshto again. What is your policy against VPNs? Do you find such tools as a threat?
Yeah, of course, and also, or moreover, let's say when they are related to pirate offers, right? So because sometimes we find VPNs, but they are not related in some point with pirate offers. So in that cases are more difficult cases. But when they are, connected and they also offer through other channel or then inform you about how to access the content, when they are related and engage in providing you the illegal content, of course that we are sending, well, that's letters or if needed, legal actions.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for this discussion, a fruitful discussion today. So just last thing, I want to remind everyone that this webinar will be published on our website and you can have access to it. And the first presentation I've made at the beginning, you can download it at any time for free. So thank you, gentlemen, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.